I think I'm going to begin now. Thank you, everyone who's joined. And my co-host on this online is Julian Ramon. He's our CEO of the actual Awaken Mind business, which is our digital side of our business. And Julian will be running a couple of polls and taking a few questions. And at the end of this presentation, you'll have the opportunity to have further chats because Julian's an expert on all things strategy around leadership and well-being. So coming to the subject today, how to foster, navigating the great disengagement, how to foster belonging and engagement at the organizational level. When we were looking at the title of this particular webinar, we were going to obviously talk about the Great Resignation, but it's not true that all areas. So we know that North America is in the thick of the Great Resignation, but it's actually not true of all countries. Certainly not Australia. We're not experiencing the Great Resignation, but what we are seeing, which is not as reported, is a huge dip in engagement and loyalty around organizations. And then speaking to some of our Asian colleagues as well, we've seen quite shocking statistics on burnout and disengagement. So we thought we'd help you address that. Obviously, it'll also address the Great Resignation and give you something that you probably haven't heard yet, something a bit deeper than the obvious. Okay, so thanks for the comments. So what I should say, hold on, before, let me just go back to that. Before is Julian will take a look at the chat function. So a lot of you have already spoken in the chat function. Great, thank you. Some amusing stuff there as well. Thank you. You know, if any questions come up with limited time, but if there's any really compelling questions that come up as you're hearing some of the content and you want them answered, please put them in the chat function, your questions in the chat function. I can't guarantee I'll be able to get to all the questions, but sometimes one or two questions and me answering them can really give you and everyone give a little bit more context. So just a first statistic we'll kick off with it. Almost half of all employees report that being at least somewhat burned out, so somewhat to extremely burned out. And it's likely that's an underrepresentation of the real number. This is McKinsey data, so it's from a credible source. So we've got the situation where a minimum of half of people are reporting that they are somewhat or extremely burned out globally. And it's likely more than that. In our experience, it's definitely more than that. But we've got a big challenge at the moment with exhaustion and emotional exhaustion and burnout in the workplace. And it turns out that, you know, if you look at the stats on the Great Resignation, for example, in the US, that it's not slowing down, it's increasing in pace, the resignation. So we know a lot of the solutions that clients are throwing at their employees are just not working. So maybe it's time to think about it more deeply. And maybe I'll give you another amusing but tragic example. I spoke with a client last week who we don't deal with all their global divisions, but one of their global offices currently has a 60% staff turnover rate, which is, as you can imagine, very, very painful commercially for them and very painful for the mental well-being in the business. Is just shocking. And they were sharing, this was the ODHR department was sharing with us that one of the primary strategies they've engaged in is basically branding, throwing resources at employees like here's an app or here's a portal to go and do some well-being stuff for yourself, but also rebranding existing activities. And the one they focused on was rebranding annual leave as a well-being opportunity. And we were laughing because so many organizations do this, right? There's all this fancy branding. They do it with values and culture as well. There's this fancy branding around what's already your legal entitlement. And then I made this comment. I said, isn't it interesting that organizations so often want to hire the best, smartest talent, and then they want to treat them like they're brain dead and idiots with stuff like that, like, oh, your well-being opportunity. And it can show a lack of commitment, but it also can show it's like a shot in the dark. How can we make this problem go away? And it just won't go away. So if you're in that situation listening to this webinar, I'm hoping that we can give you a little bit more insight, as this is not another webinar where you know, hey, here's an app or here, throw this resource. It's taking the subject a little bit more deep, thinking about it a bit more realistically. Some of you may not know who I am. Thank you for joining. I'm Michael Bunting. I've written several books on leadership and well-being. I live in a really strange world where I don't see leadership and culture and well-being as separate. I see them as integrated, and they are integrated. And we often use this term in our work when we are well, and we're talking about psychologically well. Sorry, when we are psychologically unwell, our unwellness spills onto others. That's leaders and employees. It spills onto each other. And when we are well inside ourselves, that wellness can spill onto others, and please be well. We also know that it's really quite impossible to lead effectively, and that means, you know, vision and empowerment and the classic leadership disciplines. It's very difficult to lead from a place when you yourself are burned out or unwell. So there's an integral relationship. It doesn't mean if you're well inside yourself, you'll be a great leader. That's ridiculous. It's like saying I'm fit, therefore I can swim well. There's a nuance to the discipline. But if you're not well, you're going to really struggle to lead well. Okay. So Julian's reminding you, please feel free to share your questions. And what do we do as a business? We help empower your employees to co-create a culture they love working in. So we don't see them as separate. So one of the examples I use is that if your culture is not fundamentally supporting people's well-being and performance, and you throw resources at people to try and help them be well, it's a little bit like giving people a few drinks in the desert, but you're never ever actually addressing where they are in the desert. And so we've come to realize that to create sustainable well-being and sustainable performance, you have to look at the environment, i.e. the environment shaped by leaders and culture, every bit as much as helping people on an individual basis. To separate the two, as I say, it really doesn't make sense if you understand the subject well. We also know from recent research out of McKinsey's that 47% of employees ranked increased focus on employee well-being as their top hope for the future of from their employee. And again, just iterating, that doesn't mean they're hoping for rebranding campaigns, more overwhelming resources thrown at them, and where the culture stays fundamentally the same, and maybe their leader or boss is still as disconnected as ever. And if they feel remotely sad, the boss tells them to suck it up and get over it, or whatever it is that they try and deal with. That there needs to be a real attempt at creating well-being in an organization. I'm just going to quickly check the questions. So what specifically are we going to cover? And some of you may or may not have heard this, but we're going to look at image management. So you may not have expected this as you signed up for this webinar, but why image management is making things a lot worse. So for those of you who don't know this, you're going to get introduced to this really fascinating concept of image management and what it's doing to our organizations. We're going to look at the power of genuine connection. So how can we get past image management? And then lastly, the impact of leadership, and I've already mentioned the impact of leadership on engagement and well-being. So we'll kick off with thanking you for coming. And for those of you who want a very quick, so it's like a little gift for you for coming to the webinar, thank you, is we've created an interesting document for you where it gives you 3 key strategies that you can actually start fostering connection and well-being. Relatively easy things you can apply. So if you can please scan it, you can scan it with your phone and you'll grab the document, or Julian will put a link, I think, in the, share the link, yeah, because if you're on your phone, you can't scan it, obviously. So Julian will share a link to that document in the chat function. Julian, I'm assuming you will in a minute, and I'm going to move on. Melissa, curious to know the scope of the McKinsey's research. Yeah, when I prepared this presentation late last year, I remember looking, it was extensive research, but I can't give you the exact data. I may loop back to you guys in an email on that if you're interested. Okay, so let's get into the first subject. Okay, there is the links. Julian's put the link in there. Let's look at why image management is making things a lot worse. And let's start with, what is image management? And image management is a relatively new term coined by Robert Keegan from Harvard University, who's a professor in psychology, but he's also a specialist in adult development and adult growth. That's different to adult learning principles, by the way. Adult development and adult growth is all about the question, do adults grow? Like we know children have developmental milestones. Do adults have developmental milestones? And if, for example, we had 2 40-year-old adults and we said, well, that one is more mature than that one, can you measure that? Can you measure maturity? Can you measure development? And are there developmental milestones as adults? And it turns out there are, which is fascinating. It's very well researched. And it also has a huge determinant on leadership effectiveness and mental well-being, is how mature you are, and you can actually develop yourself properly. And it's kind of, for those of you who've not heard of it, it's probably the forefront of what's going on in the leadership development, culture development space. There's now a recognition that just throwing techniques at people all day long is not going to help with some people because they're not developed enough. You need to help them develop first. And the vast majority of adults don't develop past quite a basic stage. It takes conscious work. But Keegan coined this phrase image management when researching organizations and how they function. What is image management? I'm going to give you his direct quote and I'll talk a little bit more about it. So this is the quote, I'll read it to you. In an ordinary organization, most people are doing a second job no one is paying them for. Most people are spending time and energy covering up their weaknesses, managing others people's impressions of them, showing themselves to their best advantage, playing politics, hiding their inadequacies, hiding their uncertainties, and hiding their limitations. So this we collectively call image management. And basically what it means is what I'm really thinking, what I'm really feeling, I don't speak it, I don't share it, I create some kind of image like, hey, I know everything that's going on. I'm relaxed when I'm not, or I hide my weaknesses, or I'm struggling to understand, but I don't ask the question, or I play politics. Politics is based on deceit. So it's based on, I don't talk to this person, but I talk to that person to manipulate that person. That's all collectively what we call image management. And it's in contradiction to healthy values. And it's also in contradiction to mental well-being. It doesn't serve mental well-being. And Keegan had an interesting estimate on what percentage that is. So what percent of the average person's working time and energy, so it doesn't have to be time, you can think of it as time or energy, how much of my time and or energy is taken up by this collective thing of politics, hiding, maybe being in meetings, for example, where I don't really need to be in the meeting, but I need to show up because, it's the right thing. That's image management. Committee-based decision-making often is image management. We don't want one person to make the decision. We'll protect, there's a lot to this. And we've done a tremendous amount. Sorry, Linda, I'll take a couple of questions on image management first, and then I'll talk about the data and get you guys to do a poll. So it's more of a personal image management and not an organization's image management. Linda, yes, it's more a personal image. Yes, it is, but it does extend to organizational management too. We're not saying companies shouldn't, have PR campaigns and healthy, but the problem is that when the PR campaign is incongruent with the behavior of the organization, bang, that's image management. That's when what we are saying and what we're doing are different, and we're trying to get you to buy into the idea of what we're saying is true and ignore what we're doing. And it obviously applies to leadership as well. Yes, my next book, I'm busy writing a book on this subject at the moment, and I've interviewed leaders from all around the world. That book should come out later this year. So hopefully you've got the concept now of what image management is collectively. Now, how much, this is, we want to get a live interactive poll with you guys today. And this poll we're asking you to do is completely and utterly anonymous, because we know that, it's vulnerable for you to share this information of your organization, but fortunately no one will see your answers. But we'd love you to give us a sense of how you see this in your organizations. If you think about your organization, what percentage of time and energy is wasted on being in unnecessary meetings, politics, hiding weaknesses, conversations after the conversations, pretending support is not speaking up to overwork demands, etc., etc. Where would you vote? Which category would you vote? You've got 0 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 50, 51 to 70, and plus 70. So if you don't mind, the poll should show up now. Is have a shot at that. Again, it's not scientific. Just take a rough guess in your mind. What amount of time and energy is taken up in your organization? Now, Julian, I'm assuming I can't see the results clicking in because you're in the host.
No, so I'm just going to end the poll as soon as we're done. We have recorded about 145 answers so far. I'll give it a few more seconds and then I'll show the results.
Thank you. Okay, great. So this is, I'm just absorbing this data myself. I'll just read it out as I absorb it. So we're saying, so 12% of you are saying it's in the 0 to 20%, 32% in the 21 to 30% range. So that's 12 plus 32 is 44%. And you could say roughly 66% of us are saying it's above 31%, right up into the higher ranges of image management. So to give you, that's very useful data. Thank you. I'm hoping you're also absorbing what that means. What we found, just to give you because we've done a lot of these kinds of polls with clients in a direct way. And we've seen, if we had to average out, if we had to give an average, we haven't done the stats properly, but if we had to average out, we would say it's somewhere in the region of 40% is probably where it averages out. And the average client will tell us, yeah, about 40% of our time is wasted, if you will, taken up on image management, time and energy. And Robert Keegan's initial estimate was 33%. And interestingly enough, when we first, I didn't present it to you guys, when we present image management as 33%, I would say 8 out of 10 of our clients laugh out loud and say that's too low. It's way more than that. So it's a really, it's not exact science how to measure this, but it gives you a sense of just how dramatic the problem is around image management. Now, I want to just tell you a story to give you some context of how this can manifest in simple ways, because obviously it can go to quite destructive. I mean, image management, full stop, is destructive, and also keeps an organization at an immature level. And image management is a direct contravention of values like integrity or respect. It goes directly against it, but most people are not aware enough or mature enough to even know that they're going directly against values, which, by the way, we also know that values are fundamental to mental health. So thanks for that share, Julian. So this is just a simple story to illustrate a subtle aspect of image management. And it's what I call the bulletproof leader syndrome. So one of our clients, this was about 2 or 3 months ago, they asked us to run a webinar on mental health and mental well-being and the leadership role in mental health and mental well-being. And this is a company that is one of those organizations that has been very hard hit by the COVID pandemic. Their business itself has been really hard hit. And it's not a tech business, for example. And I asked them a question: what do you think your role as a leader is in terms of how to speak to your team members and how to keep them motivated, going, connected with the organization through this pandemic? What do you think the role of a leader is? And I should also qualify. Before I asked that question, I asked them to share how they're doing personally, how they're coping personally, but as honestly as they could. And they shared quite a low number, something like 4 out of 10. They were not doing that great. And then I asked them the role of the leader, and they almost unanimously said the role of the leader is to be positive. It's to be, guys, we're going to get through this. Yes, it's tough, but we're good. I'm strong. It's to show this image if you look at the picture on the slide, is to show the image in the mirror, to not show the reality emotionally. This is a funny picture, but it's emotionally of how I'm really doing. And their viewpoint was that that's going to be really good for their employees. It's going to keep them connected. It's going to keep them motivated. But immediately after they said that, I pointed out to them that their well-being's not great at the moment. Then I asked a simple question: what's the impact on you when your boss is basically telling you they're great, everything's great, it's going to be great, it's all well, and you're not feeling great? What impact does it have? And I didn't tell them how they should or shouldn't respond to this. And again, the main answer was they felt inadequate. They felt guilty, and they felt somehow they needed to pretend more. And so then the penny dropped for them. It's like, oh, so I'm the leader trying to put up this image of everything's great, it's all going to be good. But the actual effect on my direct reports is most likely creating more psychological pain, more insecurity, less ability to share and get support on what's really going on for them. And that changed the game for this particular client of this, well, how do you navigate being more open, but still holding some sense of stability and hope? The challenge, of course, is that you have to know the tools to be well. It's if I share with you that I'm struggling and I don't know how to deal with my struggle and I'm a leader, that can obviously not go well. It's something like I'm struggling, I don't know what to do, it's all terrible. But if I share that I'm struggling, but I also can share that here's some of the things I'm up to that will genuinely support my struggle, but I'm struggling, and if any of you are struggling, you're welcome to share. That's in a simple example, the end of image management. What's fascinating about this particular story is that the intentions were best. So image management's not always from bad intention. A lot of the time it's actually from good intention. But the effect of image management is creates disconnection, and it creates a facade-based relationships. It's like the maximum you kind of get to in terms of connection with people is, how was your weekend? You know, did you have a good weekend? And so you get these kind of shallow connections, which is enhanced by the new digital world we live in, where most of your time's in a hybrid working environment, and you're sitting on a camera like we are right now, and that's already somewhat distancing and alienating. And now you've got the additional aspect of image management. Your chances of creating meaningful connection to your leaders and your team and your organization become dramatically reduced. And then it's no surprise that people are then disengaged. So we need a new kind of method to get dent into image management. So I'm just going to check questions. Yes, Mel, authenticity is mostly craved, but authenticity needs to be educated. A lot of people think authenticity is basically sprouting off their opinions of each other, or sharing personal details that are just oversharing. So there needs to be a degree of what we often call, don't be authentic, be sincere. Be in integrity and be sincere, because it can be done really poorly and create damage. Leaders should be aware of and recognizing the struggle of others to facilitate. Yes, Nathan, it's not easy to facilitate openness, but what we want to just be aware of is the damaging effect of image management. So we've asked most of our clients, what's it like when you are seeing image management happening in the organization? What's it like when you're in an environment full of image management? And no one ever reports, gee, I love it. They all struggle with it. So I'm going to move on. It turns out you can do something about it. So when we've understood image management properly, for us, we've been working with it for 20 years, but we didn't understand it in this language. But we asked this simple question: if you could reduce image management in your organization, what would happen? And you would unleash, just think about the waste of energy and time, right? You would unleash productivity, innovation, trust, mental well-being would increase. But the question was, is it even possible to do that? And we created a program. The first proper draft of it was only about 12 months ago. And we created this program to go, let's do the ending image management program. We phrase it more positively, like the values-based growth mindset, psychological safety program, right? If we really enhance values work, we really enhance accountability work, we really enhance psychological safety work, which we know makes a direct dent into image management, can we actually improve that, and do we get a better outcomes? And we were delighted that we actually were able to reduce in our research image management by up to around a third, which is phenomenal. And then we got the natural reports of people's well-being increasing, and so forth and so forth. So it is possible to do something about image management. There are factors you can cultivate that are the opposite of image management. And the hint on this webinar is it all revolves around values and values work. But tragically, most organizations do values terribly, like really terribly, and they're done from a lower level of developmental understanding as well, so they're not taken nearly as seriously. By illustration, often when we meet leaders and we say, do you take your values seriously? Yes, yes, yes. So I say, well, let's just translate it into behaviors. What are the two most important behaviors in your team that you've communicated to your team and you live and die by? What are those two most important behaviors? And I would say 99% of leaders go blank. They were like, I've never really thought about that. And we ask, well, how do you manage behavior in your team? How do you manage the culture in team if you don't have that clarity? How do you create accountability if you don't have that clarity? So this subject of values and behaviors is very poorly understood, very poorly executed, and isn't it any wonder we have such struggles with culture? Okay, any questions? My company has a speak up culture and most people don't trust that. We're trying to fix it. Yes, Tracy. It's what we call the reward for honesty. Is honesty, is it rewarding to speak the truth? And if you met with defense, denial, rationalization when you speak the truth, it's instantly the opposite of reward. But unbelievably, most of us, myself included, our natural reflex response to challenging feedback is defense, denial, sometimes attack back, sometimes rationalization. And that's at a very personal level. And again, we need to remember this, that An organization doesn't consist of an organization, it's individuals, and most importantly, obviously, senior leaders. And if senior leaders are defensive, your speak up culture will die. And if senior leaders can't role model the taking in of feedback, the actual knowing what to do with it and to change, your feedback culture dies. Again, the big challenge we see in leaders is that they do not know how to change their behavior. So we often ask leaders this question: have you ever been taught how to manage your own mind and your own emotional world, like formally? And I'd say 98 out of 100 leaders, they're clueless. And so how on earth can you change behavior? If you have a speak up culture and people are saying your behavior should be, it's currently A and it needs to be B and you need to change it, and you're a leader who's super competent and intelligent, but you don't know how to change behavior, what are you left with? You're left with defense, denial, PR campaigns and so forth, which is what we see as rife in organizations, which then creates disconnection, cynicism, and we get to the great disengagement once again. Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges, Jackie. It's super hard. Yeah, Jackie, just on your point again, you know, as you say, they're very happy to talk the talk, but can't walk the walk. You might be surprised, again, one of the pieces of data we've looked at is we ask leaders, we have these really dumb questions we ask senior leaders often. One of them is, do leaders need to walk the talk? And they all go, yes, yes, yes. And then we say, okay, great. Could you just turn to a partner and define and speak to exactly the talk you try and walk each day as a leader? You'd be amazed. I'd say 95 out of 100 leaders can't do it. They just can't do it. You know? And we can go, well, if you don't know the talk you're trying to walk as a leader, how do you walk the talk? Clueless. Some of them can, and then we usually ask 2 follow-on questions. We'll say, so when's the last time you were challenged to walk your talk? And if they can't answer, we would then respond, it's not a living practice at all. Or when's the last time you had to overcome fear or embarrassment in order to still walk your talk? Like, if, for example, if you're conflict avoidant, but integrity is one of your values, and you have to step in and address direct conversations directly, which is an act of integrity, you know, you'd have to overcome that fear of disapproval, that fear of conflict. And if your values practice is a living practice, they will be able to talk about that, but very, very few can, which is, again, a problem with adult development and maturity. The next topic is the power of genuine connection. So, you know, we've got this problem called image management in our organizations, which is not going away that fast. And we can throw, again, lots of resources and PR campaigns, but we'd propose to you that image management is doing way more damage than you realize. And it's fundamentally creating a lack of vulnerability and trust and psychological safety in your organization. But is this connection valuable anyway? Is it worth having genuine connection at work? You know, is it just a nice trend? And interestingly, there's research around this, right? So Gallup research shows that only 2 out of 10 US employees strongly agree to having a best friend at work, which is a sign of meaningful connection. It's not the only sign. If that ratio increased to 6 in 10, organizations could realize 36% fewer safety incidences, 7% more engaged customers, and 12% higher profit. It's a long-winded quote, but the bottom line is, where there's belonging, there's engagement, and where there's engagement, there's productivity. So the sense of belonging and genuine connection is very, very important. And again, you can see how alienating a lot of our clients, when we first meet them, they've thrown lots of mental well-being resources, but they're like a portal where you download stuff. There's no fostering of connection or meaningful connection through the well-being, yet connection is so fundamental to well-being. And so ignoring that in a mental well-being strategy is insane. And another quote to help you, this is Sean Acor's amazing research, amazing author, this guy. He and Harvard-based already. If we can get somebody to raise their levels of optimism, and this key is, or deepen their social connection, or raise happiness, which are all interconnected, it turns out every single business and educational outcome we know how to test for improves dramatically, right? So we now get a sense that this meaningful connection is extremely significant. We also know from another Harvard research that it actually determines longevity in people. That's how significant it is. So John, yeah, how do you create meaningful connection? Difficult subject, right? And again, remember, if you've got image management based leaders, you're going to struggle with connection. You're fundamentally going to struggle. You have to move out of image management firstly, then you have to give people a platform or some process. You have to, if you're in the HRD role and you're listening to this, you need to find a way you need to be asking the question, how can I create forums, structures, something that starts fostering? You can't make people connect, but can I create platforms, forums, where genuine connection can happen more naturally and more easily? How can I do that is crucial. We've got one of our processes, which, if I'm really honest, we fell into, we accidentally fell into this, is we were asked the question, okay, if we wanted to teach people individual awareness skills, and we've got a program that teaches people individual mindfulness skills. And John, I know you're in the mindfulness work. And a lot of us do this, right? We teach people, like, here's how to help yourself. Here's how to be more self-aware. Here's how to manage your mind, which are crucial skills. But we always had the view that we don't want to teach people an individual, we want groups to go through to have a shared experience. And we were astonished that we had data, we researched our program, and we found that all these factors, when people went through a shared group experience on a meaningful topic, not just Excel spreadsheet or something, a meaningful personal topic like self-awareness or mindfulness, that we were astonished to see, if you look at this data, it was done independently by the University of Singapore, that all these factors dramatically increased, right, from focus to flow to job satisfaction and so forth in an 8-week period, which is remarkable. What was also astonishing is that these programs were not run by us. We gave leaders, effectively team leaders, a program, and we said, here's a facilitator guide, here's 4 self-paced learnings, and here's meetings, you need to share this together. And the leaders ran this without us at all. And we got all these amazing results. And one of the things we asked ourselves is it just the quality of the training, or is there something happening in the group dynamic that's creating such a positive effect? And then in that, we obviously discovered the group dynamics very significant, particularly after the program. And I'm going to tell you one simple story that really helps with this. Rituals I'll come to in a moment. Rituals are super, super, super important. But that's another whole body of work. But we did a process for Nexus hospitals. They're a day hospital group, quite a large day hospital group, and we did it for all the medical staff. And at the end of the program, it was like both myself and my staff are more aware of our co-workers and their individual needs. It's like, oh, so the programs help people be more aware of their individual needs, but we don't look at that in the program necessarily. And we had this funny story told, and this is how you create shared meaning and shared depth. Is one of the techniques we taught in the program was the whole principle of how to look after your mind and your well-being through the day. And if you teach that in a group, can you help each other remember to support each other's well-being? And one of the techniques, this particular group, of course, walk between rooms a lot. They're a lot of the time they're on the go between meetings, operations and so forth. And we said, what human mind tends to do when it's between meetings and it's walking, and you might find as you're listening to this, your mind's doing this, the mind ruminates and wonders. So the mind's got this natural tendency to start wondering and rehashing the meeting or rehearsing the meeting coming. And all of that's really bad for your mental health, and it accumulates through the day to the point by the time you get home, you need a glass of wine to numb yourself and you're not well. How do you cultivate wellness through the day? And one of the techniques that sounds so simple we gave people is when you walk between meetings, just notice your feet and the feeling of the feet kissing the ground on each step, which is that bringing you back into the present. And they were sharing with us that became an inside joke in the organization, that when people came into a room, they would laugh and say, did you feel your feet kissing the ground? And they would all have a chuckle and say yes or no. But what unwittingly happened is that opened the door. It was held in humor, but it was a meaningful statement, because it basically was saying, did you look after your mental health? Are you okay? Are you, what's going on for you? And it opened the door for sharing no, I wasn't, because I'm preoccupied and I'm struggling with something. And so we're saying to you, you need to find as an organization some form or method to help people help each other, but also to create a shared experience of connection that helps people go beneath the ordinary surface level, operational level in the business, to be able to talk at a personal level in a skilled, quick way. And that makes a huge difference. Okay. Julian, am I missing any questions I need to answer before I move on?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, thank you. Last point, and we're coming near the end of the presentation, is the impact of, I've mentioned already, the impact of leadership on engagement and mental well-being. in a nutshell, we would say that if you've got mental well-being efforts in your organization and you're precluding your leadership from it, or it's kind of just for everyone and there's no responsibility on leadership for engagement and well-being, your process is suboptimal at best and will fail, almost certainly fail, just won't get to where you want to go. And here's some data to show you. So our work is based off the world's most researched leadership model from Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner. That was my first book. There's over 5 million people in that database that they've extensively researched on the impact of leadership on various outcomes. And one of those is engagement. And we know engagement is measured by say, stay, strive. Most engagement organizations like Great Place to Work and so on will measure it. Do you say positive things about your organization? Would you strive for the betterment of this organization voluntarily? And are you wanting to stay? And sometimes I jokingly say it's like a good measurement of a healthy relationship or a healthy marriage. You know, do you say positive things about your partner? Are you wanting to stay in the marriage, right? And are you wanting to would you be willing to put effort into that marriage? That broadly means you value that marriage and value that person, and your marriage is healthy. Well, this measurement's really fascinating because Kouzes and Posner measured, and then we remeasured it with our work, all the factors that account for a person's engagement. Obviously, lots to do with them, and it's about career fit, but all the external factors, leadership comes out at 40% of a person. It can explain 40% of a person's engagement at work. Then we were interested in measuring mental health. So we say, okay, that's a huge factor. And in Kouzes and Posner's research, nothing else went above 1%. It just sends you how enormous the impact of the leader and their behavior is on a daily basis. It's how people typically experience the culture. It's whether they get encouragement. There's a whole range of factors. But then we asked the question, yeah, but what about people's mental health? Does that leader and the way they behave impact mental health? And again, we did a huge research project on this involving several, it was about 5,000 people. And we found that a third pretty much of a person's mental health can be directly explained by their boss's behavior. So we can measure the boss's behavior and we can correlate that at a third to the way the person's describing their own mental health at the moment. And this is a shocking statistic for a lot of leaders, and it's an important statistic because, you know, we often highlight to leaders that the way you behave each day, you've got people's mental health in your hands. And obviously sometimes, you know, to add a bit of drama to it, I'll say, well, and if they've got children, you've got children's mental health in your hands, because if you're not leading well and you're not leading in a way that's constructive and you're affecting people's mental health who are parents, that's going to leak over onto their children. It's a big responsibility to lead well. But, and this is the big but, it's not as simple as being more empathetic and nice. And that's the interesting, tricky part about leadership. And I'm going to tell you a last story to highlight this. So we know Zenger and Folkman, very well-researched leadership authors, asked this question once upon a time: is it better to be a leader who's nice, you know, in terms of results, you know, outcome, organizational performance, or is it better to be a leader who's tough? And in their research, they began to realize they were asking the wrong question, because it turns out that the best leaders are both. They're nice and tough. It also turns out that only about 6% of leaders can be nice or tough. It can be nice and tough. They've got good boundaries and accountability. They can also be incredibly compassionate and empathetic and kind and appreciative. The reason why that's so rare is it turns out it's linked to adult development, because it's what's called psychological flexibility. A person who can have good boundaries but also be kind and nice it's like almost two people in them. They've got this psychological flexibility, which requires a quite high level of awareness and adult development. But most of us will default to either being too nice or too tough. And it turns out that creates over long-term suboptimal results. And I just want to highlight to you, if you're listening to this, particularly if you're in OD or HR, the danger of teaching leaders to be nice, just nice. And it comes in a story. This is a real story of a global head of OD of one of our global clients who we did an extensive development, we did a huge development program with this client. And this leader was one of the leaders we were working with. And part of our process on these intense programs is we 360 assess the leader, and then we put the leader in front of their team live. We give the team a copy of the 360. They all read it beforehand. And then we do a live debrief of the leader's behavior with the team, and we support them. That's really in the spirit of what it is to be a growth mindset, developmental, integrity-based culture. So we role model it. What turned out for this leader, which was so shocking to them, is that the number one thing their team asked their leader to address was a lack of accountability, because people were not being held accountable to poor behavior, and they were not being held accountable to poor performance. And what was fascinating for this leader was that they all collectively agreed that it was hurting their mental health, it was hurting their engagement, and they were suffering as a result of a lack of accountability, because it's no fun working in a team where someone who's behaving well just gets behaving poorly just gets away, or someone doesn't deliver and there's no accountability. And this, she was very emotional and moved, but it's like that it dawned on her that leadership is not just, healthy leadership is not just be nice and all will be well. It's a lot more complex than that. And so she's had to practice, which sounds so counterintuitive, being tougher, clearer on accountability in order to create a healthier, both healthier engagement-wise and mentally healthier team. So it's just a word of caution for all of those who are throwing be nice campaigns at your leaders. It's not as simple as that. You need to be both. Leadership's a complex challenge. Okay, so I'm just gonna, just before I go into the last part of the presentation, I like the social discipline for this window, being high in support, also high in yes, so that you can do things with people instead of for and to them. Exactly. Really interesting, Tanya. You know, one of the questions was once asked, what are the conditions you need ideally for true growth, for real development? And can you reproduce those conditions to help 100 people grow, like grow as an adult, grow as a leader? And it turns out the ideal conditions for growth are high challenge and high support. High challenge could mean anything like, look, if you don't change your behavior, you're fired. Or, you know, if you've got cancer, that's high challenge. Or diet issues, and you have to change. So in other words, there's some kind of pressure to change, seems to be a necessary condition for people to grow. But without support, what tends to happen is you get trauma, you can get shut down, you know, and it doesn't necessarily work. So in other words, you need challenge, because if you've got a high support environment without challenge, people don't tend to grow, because there's no sense of urgency. Because we say growth happens when the pain of staying the same is higher than the pain of change. That's when growth happens predictably. And if there's no pain in staying the same, there's no consequences for staying the same. As a rule, people tend to go to the fast path of their brand, and they don't grow. So it's very useful when there's an imperative. And organizations, when they do culture, they have to create an imperative around new behaviors and accountability. That's the high challenge. But without support to able to change the behavior, it doesn't work either. So the ideal conditions are high support and high challenge, which is exactly the same as leadership. Best leaders create an environment of high support and high challenge. Yeah, absolutely, Cheryl, thanks. And there's plenty of research studies we've looked at too that keep affirming this. Low accountability on behavior performance is a guarantee of mental illness in your organization and poor performance, and eventually all kinds of illness. It's where most scandals, for example, in organizations get damaged, go wrong. I bet you in the Rio Tinto example, that's all over the news. I bet you there's very low accountability. Okay, so the question you might be asking is, where are you on your journey at the moment in terms of image management, in terms of fostering meaningful connection, in terms of helping leaders navigate this dilemma between keeping their staff more connected and well, but also ensuring high performance. What we're offering today, right now at the end of this webinar, is a chance to have a chat with Julian, who my co-CEO, around just getting your head around and being able to share out loud where you are, just in terms of sharing where your image management, and being able to begin to formulate an idea for yourself of what you could do. And again, it's not about, oh, gee, we've got an off-the-shelf solution. It's just that you could actually have an intelligent, thoughtful conversation with someone who knows this, we've been dealing with for a long time, and begin to even if you take away from that call one thing that you can do practically next week, or whatever the next week after, to start moving to a more genuine, more meaningful, sustainable solution for the well-being in your organization. So you'll get you can scan this again, Julian, if you don't mind putting the link in the chat function. But again, if you're interested, no, this is like zero obligation. So I strongly encourage you to make use of this. If you just want to get your head around where you are on these subjects, or ask us, hey, what have we done that's worked? And what are we doing that's working? What have we done? Because we've also done a lot of things that have failed too. And we've seen a lot of failing examples in our clients and things that work. And you want to just get a sense of where you are and what you can do. Take a scan of this and book a time with Julian. Julian's just put the link in there as well. I'll just pause for 10 seconds so you've got time to do that. Okay. So I'm just going to stop the share. So we are now, Julian has said, leave the share up. Okay. So just in conclusion, a re-summary for you. Thank you very much for staying with us through the webinar. I hope it's been useful to you. It might be bringing up more questions to you than answers, but effectively, in summary, this webinar it's been designed to help you understand image management is a problem. And you see by your data on the poll, it's an unwitting cancer in most organizations. It's really, really eroding. And there's something you can do about it. That's the first point we wanted to make. The second point is it's imperative to foster genuine connection. Yes, it's the million-dollar question on how. We know we've had some solutions that have worked. We've also done some things that haven't worked, but whether you like it or not, you have to find a way to foster more genuine connection if you're interested in attracting, keeping the best people and then nourishing their well-being over time. Connection, meaningful connection, so fundamental to the picture. And no amount of throwing resources at people or PR campaigning well-being is going to create that connection. And then last but not least, if your well-being strategy is not somehow integrated with leadership and leadership strategy and leadership development, we again would predict it's not going to work for you. And it's putting some thought into how can you integrate those. You may have two great solutions already. How can you integrate those two? Because again, our research tells us that 1/3 of a person's mental health can be explained by the leader's daily behavior. That's a significant, it's a hugely significant figure. And therefore leaders need to be equipped on how to lead effectively, but also how to support people's well-being. That's it in summary. Thank you so much for attending. If you've got any additional questions, probably best to share those, ask those with Julian. And Julian can answer your questions in the appointment. Thanks so much. I'm just reading the comments. You're welcome to depart. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day or evening if you're in North America.